All right, okay. Thank you very much. Welcome, Janice Hahn. And for those of you, I want to welcome Janice Hahn,
Thank you.
Chair of the committee. Thank you for the extra exercise. It's always good to stand. They're very good. They deserve good credit. Go to the fire department. Okay.
Only Mr. Hahn, the judge, gets.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I did it. Tell your brother I tried. Okay.
Where do I find it? I don't deserve it.
I don't know. Go City Hall East, top. Go to the top. Okay. Here. The top. Just look at the elevator, like 19 or 20.
Kenny, ETA.
And so here, put a.
We'll go ahead. Is that
Have them
right?
do a thing.
Okay. Yes.
A firehouse. With one engine.
Okay.
Okay, and what the
Okay.
cost is.
All right.
Do a diagram. Then a firehouse. One
What
engine,
does he care about the truck?
paramedic.
Yeah.
And what the cost is.
Should I just go to the
And then
airport?
here's this here,
Bill's not here.
a firehouse with a truck, 2 engines, and a paramedic,
Bill probably wants
and a
to-
battalion chief,
Yeah.
and what that cost is.
Oh,
Got the idea? Be back in.
Have muffins
No,
and
no,
coffee.
I know, but you be back in, just stop and leave it off, then come
Okay.
back. You can leave all your stuff here, I'll protect you.
Tom?
Yes, I'm ready.
No, well, here's the deal. Person from the port is running late. So they're not here. And then Bill's late. So we'll just sit here and have tea if you want to, sing.
Yeah, okay, what I want to do
Tea and coffee. Thank you for yesterday. We had a fun chat. In that. What time?
I think I'll take that.
Okay.
Feeling better about that.
What is it? Okay. Why?
To touch base, and this is just going a peek, see if you, what your staff, here's an initiative, one initiative, going to be tasked, and then that vision, so we have the board story.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Trade, Commerce, and Tourism Committee. I'm Councilwoman Janice Hahn. I'm joined by both of my colleagues, Councilmember Tom LaBonge, Councilmember Bill Rosendahl, which we're waiting for because we knew that you wanted to be here for our airport items. We're still waiting for. Oh, Mike's here too. Oh, so we can start with item 1. Okay.
Under item 1, the Board of Harbor Commissioners submits for council approval a memorandum of agreement among the City of Los Angeles, the so-called TRAPAC appellants, and the South Coast Air Quality Management District for implementation by the SCAQMD of a program to install air filtration systems in Wilmington and San Pedro schools that are impacted by the TRAPAC container terminal operations at verse 136 to 147. The CAO also has submitted a report and a recommendation for approval of the memorandum.
Great. Colleagues, I just got to tell you, this is very exciting. I think this is a great day. It's one of the better days that I have remembered in a while. This stems from a couple years ago when the TRAPAC terminal, which was being constructed, was challenged by a group of appellants, and we worked very hard to come to an agreement so that we could move forward with this very important terminal expansion. The throughput of cargo at this one terminal in Los Angeles is equal to the entire throughput of cargo at the Port of Oakland. So that's how important this terminal is for us to be competitive. But again, it was challenged. The appeal came to the City Council, and we worked very hard with the appellants to try to prevent it from going to litigation. We felt like a lawsuit would really prolong what everyone felt was an important improvement at the Port of Los Angeles. So we had a memorandum of understanding where for every project in the future that was approved by the Port of Los Angeles, a certain amount of money would be put into a fund that would then go towards mitigating some of the negative impacts particularly in the community of Wilmington and San Pedro, from port operations. We talked about first-year projects that we wanted to focus on that would immediately, help clean the air and also, protect homes and schools from port pollution and truck traffic. So one of the first-year projects was an air filtration project. And that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be approving this. And Mike, do you want to kind of just tell us where we are in this and what does this mean for the schools in San Pedro and Wilmington?
Yes, Councilwoman. Mike Christensen, Deputy Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles. And first, Councilwoman, we'd like to thank you for the role that you played in getting this agreement. This is
Say
really,
that again.
really
in
was
my good ear.
really was a historic agreement, and it addresses something that we at the port have been trying to get our hands around for quite a number of years in terms of off-port impact. So it's a great tool. We're very much glad to see it go forward. And as you had mentioned, this was an early action item that was framed into the MOU to put improvements to the air handling systems in the local schools. Now, as we worked with the appellants on a parallel path, and Tom Russell can maybe give you a report on where that stands in a minute, on a parallel path to form the interim entity to administer the Community Mitigation Trust Fund,
Right.
we decided we needed to move out ahead of that process with this school project.
I love this.
And
I love
both
that.
the appellants and port staff turned to our friends at AQMD, who are represented here today, who have successfully performed a similar project in Long Beach schools and decided to move forward through an MOU process to let them kick this off. We have $6 million waiting in the trust fund to transfer,
Right.
and upon approval of this MOU among the appellants, the Harbor Department, and AQMD, we will transfer that money and they can start the process. It will take, and AQMD has decided to has agreed to limit the amount of administrative costs that go against it, so that we get the maximum bang for every buck in terms of applying to schools where they really belong.
How many schools will be covered by this?
I'm not sure we really know at this point because
And how did we come up with the geographical boundaries of where these air filters would go?
The geographical boundaries were set through a study that was performed. But really the number of schools will be ranked and prioritized by AQMD under a process that has worked very well in Long Beach. And the idea is that we maximize the spread of that money. And maybe AQMD and
Okay.
Tom can give you more details
Okay.
on that.
Yeah, basically, what we're doing now in our Long Beach
Can you identify yourselves for our record?
Philip Fine, South Coast Air Quality Management District. What we're doing now in our other studies is we have a contractor that goes in and assesses each school and kind of gives us a quick cost and work plan for each school, and then we can assess that cost and benefits. And we identify which schools we want them to assess based on proximity to diesel trucks and busy roadways or other sources in the area, proximity to the ports. In this case, we're going to have kind of an advisory committee made up of the appellants and some other people that will help
Right.
us with those decisions.
Because some of these schools, I know, particularly in Wilmington, have already had monitors set up for air pollution, I believe.
At various times by various agencies.
Yeah.
We've done some work as well as California Air Resources Board.
Do you have a sense of how many schools we're talking about?
The average cost we're finding is about $100,000 per school. So for this amount of money, we're looking at between 50 and 60 schools.
That's great.
Although, some of the larger schools, a big high school will cost more, and some of the smaller schools will be less.
Right. And how long will this work take once we get the agreement?
Probably, the agreement's 5 years, so we're hoping to be able to go through the funds in about 5 years, maybe 10.
It'll take 5 years to retrofit all these schools?
On the outside. Probably 10 schools a year is about
Okay.
the pace we're at now. If we can go faster, we will go faster.
And what would constitute going faster? More people, more workers?
It depends on the
Does
implementation
this cost
at the schools.
include, obviously,
Everything, yeah.
everything?
It's some administrative costs for AQMD.
Right, but you're not going to take too much.
No.
We
It's
appreciate that.
maximum
10%,
10%.
We appreciate that.
And Councilwoman, one thing that we think is a nice feature in this is it does have some maintenance costs in it too. So
true.
not only are we improving these systems in the schools, but we're giving a little bit of money to help maintain them over the term of the MOU.
Right. Now, of course, we're all about jobs, jobs, jobs. What piece of this can we all, hang on to that we're actually maybe creating 40 or so good jobs of folks who have been trained to install air filtration in buildings?
There may be two components to that. One is part of the project is to train the existing school maintenance staff in the maintenance. That may not be new jobs, but there is a training component.
All right.
Currently, we're out with a request for proposals to perform this work,
Right.
And that has not been completed yet, and we have to follow our own procedures for that. There is extra points awarded for local businesses, and if a local business does get this, there should be considerable
Yeah, I would
jobs.
really like to write into this some local, job training and job hiring, maybe working with their local workforce centers. I mean, this is the kind of thing I think we envisioned years ago when we began drafting this MOU, was not, particularly for this nonprofit entity. I mean, not only would we be cleaning up the air, but it was going to be this great opportunity for some of these good green jobs, because ultimately we're going to be doing double pane windows as well. So there was a sense, I think, from all of us that this is an opportunity to maybe take some folks who are out of work, retrain them to install this stuff, and really put them on a path to kind of partner as we clean the air and protect our children, giving some people some new skills and good jobs in the long term. So could that be a part of this?
Well,
Could we work on
like
that?
I said, we're kind of tied to our own bidding procedures. We can't change our policies. One of the potential awardees is a local business, and obviously if they get this large contract, larger than the ones that they have already from us, they will have to hire some local staff.
So there's nothing at this point that we can...
We're out for bid already. I mean, we can, once we decide on a contractor, we can work with the contractor to make sure that and track at least how many jobs
All
are
right,
created
well, we would like to
locally.
be involved in that.
Okay.
Yes, Tom, you look like you want to say something.
No, I think, Mike mentioned update on mission infrastructure and our interim entity formation.
Right.
And just to bring you up to date, the board did approve an agreement with mission infrastructure in December for $450,000 to develop the ultimate nonprofit entity that's going to be administering these TRAPAC funds under this great agreement that you helped us negotiate. And so we are going to be proceeding with that, meetings with the appellants, with legal analysis, starting up very soon. In fact, I just spoke to their lead attorney, Joe Burton, yesterday about this, and so they're moving forward with that.
Great. We had some other year one projects, like local health clinic funding, job training hiring program. Where are those other year one projects? Do we know?
I think,
It's not
Councilwoman,
really
they're
year one
largely
anymore.
waiting on the formation of this interim entity,
Okay.
because in order to really settle on those, they have to
Okay.
have
Okay.
the ability to select the project and administer those funds.
It's interesting because also our year one projects included job training and hiring. So, I mean, that was the vision. It definitely was cleaning the air. It was definitely mitigating negative impacts of the port. But we've always said this laboratory that we're creating at the port with our Clean Air Action Plan, the Clean Truck Program, we're really giving a great opportunity for these green technology type jobs. So we want that to be a part of this.
And as you're aware, Councilwoman, we had also one of the key elements was to do this study, this off-port study, and that really was the lead-in that would determine where they want to.
So that was also one of the year one projects. We're waiting for the entity to get set up. And I know that's been very difficult. I know Jenny Chavez on my staff has been working very closely, and it's complicated. But I'm telling you, this is the things that we will look back on, I really believe, and say it was one of the most important things we ever did long term.
Well, thank you, first of all, for your leadership on this for the last few years. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for what you put forward historically. But Dr. Fine and I go back to the Santa Monica airport issues, and he's quite a contributor and a tremendous leader, and we appreciate your work with that airport. Question is this. We're talking 40, 50 schools over 5 years. We talk about $6 million. Does that all work budget-wise, time-wise, and everything?
And it's hard to tell, because until we get into the school and see what the situation is, we can't make a hard prediction of how much each school is going to cost. But based on what we've done so far, that roughly $100,000 a school, maybe a little bit less, is a good guide.
And the school is a school, the kids. What about the rest of us who are in the office business, in our homes, in our shops, and the other people in the community? How does this impact them, and do we have any strategy of dealing with adults and this toxicity?
So far, our work on these filters has only focused on schools. There's no reason to believe that they wouldn't also be effective in office buildings or other places of work or even residences, but we have not focused our efforts there yet. The funding we have had to do this work has been focused on schools.
Yeah. So the clarity is that it is an issue. So obviously we're willing to take $6 million and retrofit the schools so that it works.
Right.
So therefore we know that it affects everybody.
Right. And just to give you a sense, it's not a very elaborate. In some cases, it's not a very elaborate system. I mean, these are basically high efficiency filters that fit into your existing air conditioning systems. It's just it's instead of $2 a filter or $5 a filter or 10, these are about $100 a filter.
I see.
But
so
they last
are we
6
in
months or
discussion
longer.
with maybe the Chamber of Commerce or other community groups about it being sort of retailed or wholesaled or something to the rest of society around there?
Not at this point, although the contractor we're currently using on the current projects does sell these retail.
Well, again, I think this was, this was the first project we're going to do, and ultimately this nonprofit entity that we're creating with the board of directors will be the ones that will decide. Maybe their next project is businesses. Maybe their next project is some homes. But we're going to let them kind of make those decisions as we move forward. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get there now, but originally we were talking about maybe $50 million into this fund. Like I said, I don't know if we're going to get there in 5 years, but that's
No, I
significant.
think it's sensational,
That's
but
significant.
my hope is that the rest of the adult world in there realize that we're looking at the lungs and the health of the kids. We also look at our own, and maybe it will have its own natural multiplier effect where people have access to getting those filters, and know how to put them in. Say you got a skyscraper with 5 stories and people are working in that building, or a multi-complex development project or something like that, that it becomes sort of a standard operating procedure, because we admit the air is what it is, that we would go forward with the private sector strategy at the same time we're obviously doing the school and the public strategy.
I move the question.
Anything else? Well, again, I really appreciate everybody's work on this. I know it was more complicated than we all thought. I really want to thank all of you, and I think it's a great idea that we're partnering with AQMD for this first project. It's very exciting. You know, the last report from CARB was that there was 350,000 days of lost school because of cargo-related pollution. So, I mean, I think this is significant that we make sure that we're trying to protect the health of our kids and our communities.
Exactly, and just since you didn't move it, I'll mention the fact that while we focus on children is they're still in a developing stage.
Right.
Yet it's a challenge for all of us. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Without objection, we'll approve this unanimously and really very
Again, thank you,
exciting.
Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you all for working on this. Okay.
Madam Chair, may I be excused?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 2.
The Board of Harbor Commissioners submits for council approval 2 successive permanent board orders, both amending by ordinance Port Tariff Number 4, Section 20, Items 2000 and 2015, concerning the Clean Air Action Plan Clean Trucks program. And the amendments would extend the deadline for the phase-out of 1993 and older model year drayage trucks from port operations by 4 months, extending the deadline from January 1 of this year to April 30th. The CAO has submitted 2 reports and recommendations for approval of the 2 ordinances to amend the tariff relative to extension of this deadline. And the key fact that we need to keep in mind is we want to adopt the 2 board orders and ordinances in the order that the board adopted them.
Right.
The second one amends the first one.
Right. Because last time we had one and we didn't have the other, so that's why we continue this. Okay. Tell us what this is.
Yes, council members, as you're probably aware, under the Port's Clean
Name for
Air,
the record.
Mike Christensen with the Port of Los Angeles. As you're probably aware, our Clean Air Action Plan put in place a succession of port dredge truck bans. And as we came to the ban that was to be implemented on the 1st of January of this year, we found there were a couple of what I might characterize as unintended consequences of that ban. One occurred in that there were a number of dredge truck owners who had secured private financing for the newer, cleaner trucks, but because for a various number of reasons, those trucks hadn't been delivered yet. So they had a purchase order, they were ready to go, but the truck was just not in their hands yet.
Right.
That was problem number one. Problem number two was that there were a number of dredge truck owners who had entered into programs with CARB, who had given funding administered through AQMD for alternate fuel trucks, LNG trucks, who were also backlogged. And as a caveat to that second problem, CARB also released some additional money towards the end of last calendar year to even buy more. ARB and AQMD had put together a selection process where they had gone out and listed by priority order trucks that they were willing to fund, and available funding only made it partway down that list, and then they got more funding. So bottom line, CARB put forth a regulation that extended the ban out to the 30th of April to accommodate both those situations of private and also publicly funded moves to cleaner trucks.
Right.
We then brought to our board of Harbor Commissioners, and they approved language that put us and put our tariffs in sync with the CARB rules, so that these drayage operators could have a little more time if they had shown that they were either buying a truck with their own money or they were in the queue for the publicly funded truck. So that's what we brought, what comes before you this morning.
Good. I mean, I like hearing that, because obviously we've never done this before. It was extremely complicated to implement. So I appreciate the fact that we're working with the truck drivers and the companies, to get everybody in compliance. Do you know how many clean trucks are operating at the port these days?
I'm not sure I have the exact figure.
I think it's 6,000 in that range.
Something close to
6,000?
that, yes.
Okay. And do you know what the total amount of grants that have been made to drivers for new trucks?
And that, Councilman, I don't believe I have. I could get that for you.
Okay. And we know that there's still some state money from Prop 1B bonds. Has there been any word from CARB as to when a new round of grants?
It's interesting you ask that question, Councilwoman, because I'm going to be in Sacramento next week. In fact, we're looking at what can be done with the Prop 1B clean air funding. There are suggestions maybe it gets moved to some other locations, maybe not in this region of the state, and we're going to be advocating to keep those funds here. In the case of the funds that had been designated to the port area, that they stay in the port.
Right. Well, we always talk about 43% of the goods in the country, but we move 85% of the goods in the state of California. And
Are you talking to Jenny Arpaza or Ted Lieu up there?
All of the above, plus we'll be meeting with Secretary BTH to try to enlist their support through the administration on this as well.
Okay.
I think it's great.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Okay.
We'll approve this, or we'll adopt. Do you move to adopt both these ordinances?
Moved.
Okay. So moved. Thank you very much. Okay. Airports.
Under item 3, the Board of Airport Commissioners submits for council approval an authorizing resolution for the issuance and sale of one or more series of revenue bonds payable from the Airport Revenue Fund in an aggregate principal amount of up to $2 billion for the purpose of paying or reimbursing the department for capital expenditures at LAX and refunding certain previously issued notes and bonds of the department and or the Regional Airports Improvement Corporation. Also, the resolution would authorize private sale of such bonds, the selection of underwriting firms for the private sale, the preparation of all related documents, and certain other related matters. The CAO has submitted a report and recommendations for approval of the authorizing resolution and approval of the specified underwriting firms. The Chief Financial Officer of the department has submitted a recommendation that the private sale would be of benefit to the city as opposed to more benefit than the competitive sale.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to hear that. So this is we want to issue $2 billion
Correct.
in bonds, and you're recommending a non-competitive sale.
That's correct.
You want to tell us why?
Sure. Given the current market dynamics.
Name for the record.
Oh, excuse me. Ryan Yakubik, Director of Capital Development and Budget at Los Angeles World Airports. A competitive or a negotiated sale in the current environment, particularly where the markets are still somewhat turbulent, is very much justified on a number of fronts, particularly airport revenue bonds are considered slightly more risky than a standard general obligation bond of a typical city. For that purpose, investors tend to apply a risk premium to it and tend to spend a little more time doing credit homework on those bonds. So the ability to have somebody go out and actually market these bonds in a concerted effort, which is something that we're currently not really tooled up to do, spending, good amounts of time getting investors comfortable with a credit, is something that a negotiated sale will allow an investment bank to go out there and really pound the pavement in selling these bonds.
How is the airport's bond rating these days?
The airport is currently rated AA by all three, in the AA category, by all three of the rating agencies.
Okay. Do we know what this $2 billion is going to be used for?
Yes, the $2 billion will be primarily used to support the $1.5 billion Bradley West construction project that has just gotten underway. I believe you guys were just there.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, there'll be, to a lesser extent, these will support the initial funding for the replacement and construction of a new central utility plant at the airport, and as well.
Be used for refunding prior debt.
Some of the proceeds, if the opportunity arises, may be used to purchase leasehold improvements from lessees at the airport, which will give us clean right and title to make further improvements in the terminals.
Okay, last fall we approved a $1.6 billion issuance.
Yes.
Those all been sold?
Actually, we only ended up issuing about $700 million.
Okay.
Much of the bulk of that authority was for the possibility of refinancing some of our previously issued AMT debt through a tender offer. We had limited success in our ability to do that. We did garner some savings, but it was something that the market just didn't digest.
Okay, I see where you're going to give this to Goldman Sachs.
There is one potential deal out there that we may give to Goldman Sachs if the opportunity arises.
Those of people out there, me being one of those, it's concerned with the fact that Goldman Sachs is under federal investigation. Is this a good time to be giving them one of our deals?
Well, Goldman Sachs was chosen through a previous competitive selection to be included in our pool. They did a very good job for us back in 2008, underwrote a significant portion of the bonds for us. We still believe that they have the capability of doing this. Should some major issue arise prior to the time we go out to sale with them, we would certainly take alternative action. I think we've got built within the resolution the flexibility to swap that out if something arises.
Yeah. You think or you know?
Beg your pardon?
You think or you know that there's some flexibility?
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You said, I think.
I apologize.
Okay. And then the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, you stated that it would help to reduce our borrowing cost.
Certainly.
How does that work?
One of the nuances of airport bonds is that airport bonds can, in some instances, be subject to the alternative minimum tax. And that's particularly for debt that's used to finance terminal improvements, of which a majority of what we're doing are terminal improvements. Because that these bonds are subject to the alternative minimum tax, typically they add a premium to the cost of borrowing, anywhere as high as 1 to 1.5% over our typical cost of borrowing. Through the stimulus package, airports were given a 2-year holiday from being exposed to this alternative minimum tax. So while we typically have very murky ability to foresee rates, what we do know is after December 31st of this year, our cost of borrowing will automatically go up because we will again be subject to the alternative minimum
Okay,
tax.
very interesting. So this is a good window for us to take advantage.
This is a terrific window,
Okay.
particularly considering a big chunk of our program is doing construction projects in terminals.
Right, because, very good. All right.
A couple of 3 questions. There are, on section 4 of this report, it mentions 10 or 11 different bonding groups. Now, they're all part of that particular process, be it Barclay, Capital, Citigroup, Cabrera, De La Rosa, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley. Does that mean that you will be looking at them in a way to figure out which one offers you the best, or have you already decided on that?
Well, we have already decided that and named certain groupings we foresee up to for different financings, depending on market conditions and opportunities that arise. The first one through the gate will be a smaller team of led by Siebert Branford Shank, and including Morgan Stanley and Barclays Capital and E.J. De La Rosa. That will be the first one out of the gate that we know we will probably be able to price somewhere.
How much will that be worth? How much?
That could be upwards of 800 to 900 million.
Okay.
So our goal is to get as much out as soon as possible. Rates are still relatively low, and our ability to lock that in will be important. The follow-on financing would be led by J.P. Morgan. The financing that would be led by Goldman Sachs will be the potential for a Build America bond issue, which is another component of the stimulus package, should we actually be able to identify both a market demand and sufficient amounts of needed capital. And then the final piece is would be a deal led by Citigroup to refund some of these outstanding REIC bonds that would give us that clean right and title to some of these terminal improvements.
Okay, just for the public to understand that by moving forward with this, in no way does it impact the city's general fund. Explain that just for the
Absolutely not. These bonds are have no obligation of the City of Los Angeles and are only an obligation of the airport as supported by the airport's revenues. The bonds will be supported by fees and charges to airport users only.
Yeah, I have a few more questions, but just off the top of my brain, timing is everything. We're living in a very critical moment in our recession. Is the urgency greater than the timing, or how do you play that? Because we know we're in a tough spot
Well, we certainly know we're in a tough spot, but interest rates are incredibly
the right
low.
time to go to the market.
This is as good a time as we could get. And every day that we wait, we know where the market is today. Every day that we wait is an unknown. So, in the long term, we would expect that interest rates would probably rise, but we don't know when that will happen. So the sooner we can get to market, the better.
Our timing is better to do this at this time.
Most certainly.
Okay. And then you mentioned briefly when Ms. Hahn was asking you about projects. The $2 billion in addition to the $1.6 billion brings it up to $3.6 billion. If my math is correct, or roughly thereabout. This will finish the Bradley Terminal, okay, in all of its aspects. It'll do the power station and what else?
This will fund the majority of the Bradley West improvements. This is a 3-year construction project that's going to take some time. We'll probably do a final tranche of financing closer towards the end of the project. It will also be some initial financing on the central utility plant. There are some minor airfield paving improvements that we'll probably do along the way that this may finance as well, in addition to the possible other
Will it have any ability
improvements.
in its financing to assist us in figuring out how the Green Line and the People Mover connection happens? I went on a tour with Congressmember Harmon and DeFazio the other day looking at that issue there. Does any of these funds have some relationship to both the People Mover and the Green Line?
These funds don't directly have a relationship to that. These are only for capital improvements, but there are studies underway that identify the relationships to those projects
You can keep
at the
bringing
airport.
it up.
Yeah, and we will until
Certainly.
we got that stub into the airport. What do we expect will be the total cost of the Bradley West project?
Somewhere around $1.5 billion.
How much of Lawa's capital budget this year will be derived from bonds versus other revenue sources?
In terms of the capital improvements that are funded directly this year, we expect to spend somewhere around $1 billion in the current fiscal year as well as next fiscal year. A good portion of those will be funded through these bonds. Some amount of the airport's actual cash balance will go into funding those, as well as some of the passenger facility charge collections at the airport.
How do you see
Regularly
this
collects.
debt impacting Lawa's credit rating?
We have modeled out this debt to the rating agencies, and all of these improvements explain what this looks like in the future to the airport, the impact on our debt service coverage, and our other metrics, along with rather conservative forecasts of our traffic and what the cost per enplanement to our airline users will be. The rating agencies are comfortable with what we've presented to them and have maintained our ratings thus far in light of that entire program.
Will this be the bonds strategy for 2010? Will we also be doing more bonds in 2011?
We will probably be doing a smaller amount of bonds in 2011, if any. This financing should give us a pretty good leg up on anything that we would need to do in 2011. So if anything occurs in 2011, it would be a relatively small amount before some cleanup financing in 2012.
Great. Well, those are my questions, and thank you so much.
Very thorough. I'm just going to ask you to do the math for us real quick in terms of the stimulus advantage on this bond issuance. What does that save us?
Well, if you just borrowed $1 billion in a single year, a 1% savings, and that's rather conservative, it could be more than that, would save up to $10 million annually. And that's $10 million annually over the next 30 years. So doing that math, the present value of that is upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's very significant. And what will this borrowing cost us over 30 years?
In terms of cost, interest rate cost, or
our debt service total?
You know, our debt service will increase overall to the airport to somewhere in the range of $150 to $170 million annually. A portion of that will be paid through passenger facility charge collections, with the remainder being paid through charges and revenues of the airport.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Oh, and one thing of note is that the CAO report did inadvertently exclude two of the investment banks that will be participating in this transaction. It was part of the resolution authorized by the Board of Airport Commissioners. That's MR Beal and Loop Capital, and I think it was just inadvertently excluded from the CAO
report. Are they in
report.
the first issuance?
No,
or
they're not.
Which one are they in?
I believe they're in the second issuance.
Okay.
By the time it gets to council, make sure it's all in there.
It's all in the authorization that the council will adopt, but the CAO's report to council would be excluded of that.
Yes, Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. Our office did review the airport's report, and we do concur with the department's recommendations, including the inclusion of the underwriting firms of Loop Capital and MR Beal as part of the selling group, which Ryan just mentioned.
Good. Okay, we have a public speaker on this item, Arnold Sachs.
What's KC stand for?
Not Lawa. Just to clarify for you, Madam Chair, it's the Goldmans of the Goldman Sachs that are under investigation. The Sachses of Goldman Sachs. They're good people. I don't want to ruin my name. I don't want to get associated with that.
Oh, that's right, your name.
Oh,
Bond.
okay.
I'm certainly glad you figured that.
I mean, that
Took me a while, though.
Yeah, me too. I was like,
brother, it's all this bond talk, which reminds me, we're coming up on a 4-year anniversary of when you first brought this up in City Council. And at that City Council meeting, you said we need to sell $950 million worth of bonds for our Lawa improvement. So that was 4 years ago. Then in 6/5/08, Los Angeles City Council agreed Wednesday to issue $950 million worth of bonds in 08. LAX is preparing to sell $1 million in bonds, 7/1/09. 8/18/09, the airport commissioners Monday approved the sale of $1.6 million in bonds, which you mentioned. The Moody's investment cost the city, according to Mike Molina, 35% higher cost for the costs on the renovations of Lawa. What else we got here? 2 more ratings. No, same bond. So what bonds are we talking? What's the price? What bonds? 3.2 million. You mentioned airport terminal improvements.
But you're building a new terminal, so is that part of terminal improvements, or is that a totally different category? Because just going to one or two council meetings and a few of these committee meetings, you learn to differentiate between the language that's used. It's not, a new terminal is not terminal renovations. Grand plans for Lawa. You just mentioned the funding, but it doesn't include the funding to build the passenger processing facility immediately across from Bradley. Oh, and this is from 11/18/08, where they show the renovations, the architectural model, which I always complained about, that didn't include a midfield concourse. Where's that
Very
spending?
much. Okay.
Thanks for the bonds.
Seeing no other public speakers, do you have any other comments?
So moved.
Okay, so moved. Thank you very much. Item 4.
Under item 4, the Board of Airport Commissioners submits for approval the third amendment to the operating agreement with Service Air, LLC, for the operation of 24-hour courtesy shuttle services between the public and employee parking lots, airline terminals, the Metro Green Line Aviation Station, and the Central Terminal area at LAX. The proposed third amendment would extend the contract term for 9 months on a month-to-month basis, beginning on April 1, 2010, and ending on December 31. And the amendment also would increase the hourly rates for this extension period, pending completion of the request for proposals process for award of a new contract for the courtesy shuttle services at LAX. The CAO has submitted a report and recommendation for approval of this amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl.
Just one question. How often is the shuttle running from the Green Line station and from the parking lots? There's been some concern that it isn't as frequent as it should or inconvenient or whatever.
Tremaine Knowles, LX Shuttle Contract Manager, Los Angeles World Airports. Currently, the headways for the Green Line service around 10 minutes during the peak hours of the day. Off-peak, which is usually low ridership around towards the evening time, runs around 10 to 15 minutes.
And the parking lots?
The employee parking lots currently 7 to 10 minute headways on a daily basis.
And how many folks would you say take advantage of the shuttle altogether from be it the Green Line or the parking lots?
I would say on a monthly basis, we move around 1 million passengers a month.
Well, thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, so this is basically just extending the contract with Service Air to the end of the year while we do a new RFP. So my questions would be about we entered into a settlement agreement with the Attorney General over Service Air's treatment of disabled passengers. So is the Attorney General still monitoring Service Air in this regard? Have the corrective actions been taken with Service Air? Are we monitoring this? Are we getting any complaints at the airport, particularly as it regards to our disabled passengers?
Good morning, Selena Burke, LAX
Morning.
Airport Manager. Yes, there is monitoring is continuing, and we are in the process
by
us and the state.
Okay.
They move about 500 disabled passengers, and so we have not gotten any complaints since that settlement agreement. We are buying some additional buses about the next year, and all of them will be ADA.
What was the complaint about?
It was primarily about the buses and the ability to move disabled passengers effectively and efficiently on all of the buses.
Okay.
It's the type of lift in the area in the bus that has disabled movability.
Okay. Now, this contract is just for LAX, right? Or is it out in Ontario?
This is just for
Just
LAX.
Okay. I don't have any other. How are we doing on the RFP? What's the current status of that?
There's an RFP out on the street. It was released in the fall. We're about ready to do another amendment to it, which is going to extend their proposers' time to be able to put it together. So we expect that to be probably towards the end of April is when they will have to respond. We'll evaluate it, and that 9 months will give us time to then negotiate the contract and get it back to the board.
The other thing we're doing is approving an increase in the operator's hourly rate on this one. How do we monitor that?
Well, they report to us what they pay, and this increase was a direct result of the living wage changes in January, and so it's just reflective directly of the living wage ordinance
Right,
changes.
so we just monitor that like we do all of
Through our contracting group, correct.
Very good. Okay, any other?
Great, no, wonderful.
Okay, I see no public comment on this one, so we'll approve that recommendation. Okay, we have one more public comment before we adjourn. Arnold Sachs.
Thank you. Good morning, Arnold Sachs. You know, and I explained this to Councilman Rosendahl last week, I'm not always coming forward with bad news. I explained to him that in this newspaper article from the LA Times, no, this is from the Daily Breeze, the city's $1.5 billion expansion is said to be the costliest project ever. In this article from the LA Times, the airport expansion project, LAX Tom Bradley International Terminal, officials said the $1.26 billion project will be the most expensive the city has ever undertaken. I said if you get two more newspapers at that rate, the price will go down. They'll owe money. They won't be paid. It won't cost anything. It'll be gotten for free. By any chance, did anybody happen to see the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago where they rated Lawa? Never mind the rating. Did you see this great picture of this train, this rail system at Detroit Airport? Detroit Airport has a rail system. What's Lawa got? Have fun walking. The safety report that just came back from NASA. 5 choices. One person on that committee said, is that the safest of the 5 choices? Is that the least expensive of the 5 choices that we made? Sure, it's the least expensive because it doesn't involve doing anything. But 5 choices, and what is that joke about 2 blind men and an elephant? That's not his trunk. And then finally, this article, February 22nd, 23rd, just weeks ago, work was quietly completed on the $723 million interior renovations at Bradley Terminal. In 2013, $90 million worth of that work will be knocked down. In this article, 9/2008, the airport stands to save $70 million to $110 million in construction costs by building the gates on the back of Bradley Terminal, but they're going to lose $90 million tearing those gates down.
Thank you
so
very
what's
much.
the savings? Thank you very much. It's great leadership.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, dear.